Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, the only thing that stands against people like Ini Khalillah are the blackouts. We are very proud to propose this motion, right? Mark sounds like a typical West Malaysian tyrannist, right? He tells you that there's progress. Let me just start by telling you who I am. My name is Brendan. I was born and bred in Kuching, right? I know this. Equality doesn't exist, ladies and gentlemen. I spent the bulk of my time spending hours in rural areas who don't have access to electricity, who don't have proper roads to extend to these areas. What kind of equality are you talking about if after 55 years you can't even build proper roads to those rural areas? We think it's illogical. Right? When you can have LRTs in the west and etc., we think that it's largely disproportionate. I am truly insulted. Right? What's the logic behind removing ourselves from West Malaysia, right? In other sense, we want Sabah and Sarawak to unite. In other words, we want one Borneo. But moreover, right, we want to have the benefits like where Kim Ham comes from, Singapore, right? Joke. All right, proving impracticality, right? He tells us it's impractical, right? That there's a brain drain, right? That Albert tells you there's a brain drain. But once we do this, people will return back to Malaysia, capable people. Because we never had the chance to even consider that we could stand up, right? Once this change is allowed, like Khalillah, we have a change. We can finally see the opportunity that we can stand up for change, right? People will return to take on this challenge, to take over, right? He tells you that we should have collective benefits, that our expectations are too high. I told you it's largely disproportionate. It's not enough. He tells you that eventually it will happen. After 55 years, not much change has happened. When will it? Mark? Alright, he tells you that there's benefits to federalism. Albert in his POI tells you that it's not mutually exclusive. Sarawak, as an independent state, can also derive these benefits. A lot of FDI has interest, but it's unfortunately shifted to the tyrants by the federal, right? We don't think, Albert told you that equality didn't exist. The cobalt has been violated. Most people don't even know what they deserve. Progress, what is progress? Progress means you need to be dependent. Ladies and gentlemen, that is what we're fighting for. I forgot to time myself. Okay, I have 3 arguments for today.
What exactly does government want this debate? Okay, succeed, then what?
Succeed, have our own state, alright? We want people to start seeing that there's a greater opposition from federalism, right? From the federal state. We want a chance to have our own, because it is largely disproportionate when most of the resources come from us, but we don't have the power to derive that for ourselves. Sit down, no more. Alright, better democracy for ourselves, the Borneans, and also for West Malaysia. Why? It prevents gerrymandering. Most of the areas in Borneo are disproportionately supported, disproportionately support the incumbent, both politically and financially. Power entrenchment, in other words. Separation, if we are allowed to separate, what is cost for the West? More seats to be derived from West Malaysia itself. Equal balance, because most of the seats for the incumbent comes from Sabah and Sarawak. If you allow the removal of that, you allow more mathematically proportional numbers for Semenanjung, for people on their voices to speak out for themselves and be represented within that little country, that little area there. Sorry, no time. So we cannot consider the needs of the West, which is hugely different from Borneo, like Albert told you about. We need to allow the voices of the ground. We tell you also that in Borneo, sorry, no time. Borneo, any political individual tends to believe that they can win only by serving the majority. It has happened for many years. They only give minimalist amounts to these people because they know that they will win anyway. Even if it's not true, these kind of situations brood this sort of rhetoric, this sort of complacency, right? Albert also told you, right? Politicians will lean towards national agenda once they're elected, instead of the local agenda, the specific rights and cultures that we're telling you about, right? We don't want our specific needs to be diluted by what happens in the West. Alright, also, right? Politicians you haven't seen any new political parties or new movements moving up because people start to become complacent, that incumbent will always win because we have no chance. We'll always, even if they realize there are specific benefits for the specific cultures, they will always think that they have no chance. But once you remove that from that mindset, from that controlling mindset, ladies and gentlemen, that's when change will happen, right? You are forced to think, right, what do I do now? We need the Borneans to think of it. Let's look at also how it benefits the people on the ground in Borneo, right? What happens now under current status quo is that it indoctrinates a minimalist mindset, especially if after decades you are unable to see any other possible side to it. It forces you to be complacent, it forces you to be minimalist, right? Even if the incumbent is already good, you can't rationally process, stand up for a while, you can't rationally process any form of benefit of any opposition. Ini kanila.
So, every individual in any state, even in the federal territories, has a complaint about the federal government. Are you now saying that every state has to secede from the federal government?
Yeah.
Or has a reason?
Right. You know, the thing is, it's because of all the inequality that I pointed to you about. Speaking about Indian and Chinese losing out, number one, they have initially agreed to that status, right? But Bumiputras were supposed to have that greater equality from the beginning within the agreement. It's not the same, right? Furthermore, right, we don't want them to be continuously reliant, all right? You know, even if they're good, I told you, they can't see any possible benefits ever happening. Borneans are typically very tribal-minded. They're very loyal in nature, like me to my girl there, right? But this politically dependence is due to loyalty is due to dependence, that they could not see any other form of benefits derived from them, seeing the incumbent as demigods because of nature. That's why the only way that change can happen if you force it to happen through this way, right? The removal now forces people to shift their paradigm, to consider various other options, right? We don't want any form of Stockholm effect to happen. Now that they are forced, they now consider who can serve them best. New forms of benefits, right? With removal of what seemed to be initially best for them. They never had the power to do that, not even the power to consider what was good for them. I'm very proud to propose.